story we brought you yesterday. The police chief behind a Gestapo-style raid on a small Kansas town newspaper was being investigated by the paper over claims of sexual misconduct. The paper's co-owner Eric Meyer tells News Nation his reporters received word of several allegations from the police chief's co-workers, but ultimately no victims came forward, and so the paper decided not to run the story. Meyer believes the subsequent police actions and the stress was too much for his 98-year-old mother, who passed away one day after authorities raided her home and office.
She wouldn't eat her dinner. She wouldn't eat breakfast. She wouldn't sleep. She sat up most of the night, muttering things like, "This is going to be the death of me." I tried to calm her down and say, I think maybe good will come out of this in the end, that something will be exposed and we'll be able to advance out of it. And she says to me, "I'll be dead by then."
So joining us now to talk about this is News Nation legal contributor Jesse Weber. Jesse, thanks so much for coming on.
Great seeing you. Thanks for having me.
It is a convoluted case, but Jesse, does this latest development change the way that you are perceiving and tracking this case?
It just looks even worse than it already did. So there were so many legal questions that were arising about whether or not law enforcement has the right or authority to enter into a news organization and take their property. And I could go over why federal law protects news agencies and media organizations from that happening. But now to learn that the chief of police who was spearheading this raid may have been investigated by the very paper that he had his officers raid, it doesn't look good. And so what you're basically seeing is this puts the impetus on the police department to say, why did they feel justified to do this? I mentioned federal law. When you raid a news organization, typically speaking, the law requires a subpoena, not just a warrant, a subpoena. And so why they felt the need to raid the office and figuring there was this level of criminal activity that was going on, they now have to show cause for why that happened. And I have to tell you, from a PR point of view, it just looks really bad for the police department. But then again, they feel that they had the right to do it. We have to see what this investigation is going to
we are still waiting to hear what that justification is. And we know in addition to this new piece, that the paper was also working to confirm information about a local restaurant owner's DUI. Eric Meyer believes that complaints from her could have also triggered the police response. But ultimately, do these raids just put even more of a spotlight on these stories? We are now talking about this on a national level.
And rightfully so, because this doesn't happen. We don't see this happen. And I believe this newspaper never saw anything like this happen. I mentioned the federal law, right? So generally speaking, law enforcement has the ability to enter into private residences or businesses if they believe there's probable cause a crime was committed. They can obtain materials, but news organizations are different. They're given extra protection. And so there's a reason we don't usually see this happen. Now, if you take what they say is true, that perhaps the newspaper was engaged in identity theft on a grand scale, if we take that as true, then they may have justification to go in there and see evidence of that. But what you're hearing about, this was a raid where somebody's finger was injured and cell phones were taken, and whether or not material was taken outside of what the search warrant was, and sadly someone passed away as a result of the stress of this, that's where this enters into a different territory, and we're trying to make sense of why this happened.
Yeah, trying to make sense of it. I know you'll help us keep tracking this as well. Jesse Weber, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.